Hello. On this Dot Loop Minute video, we're going to talk about your new buyer prospects agency docs loop, some best practices in managing and maintaining this loop, and how we can take information from this loop and put it into our transaction loop. So let's start here with our buyer prospect agency docs. You all have your own. It starts with your initials. You can search it that way. When you first come into this loop, there's blank, there's nothing in it. There are no templates or anything created. This loop was designed to house buyer agency documents before they find the property, before they find the one that they want you to write an offer on. So we're meeting them this weekend, for example, to show them some property. We know we have to have the signed buyer agency agreement to go in the front door with them. We also know that we either have had or will have first substantial contact. So our working with real estate agent disclosure is required. We may also have Form 220, cooperation and compensation if the listing firm or seller is offering to pay our commission. So we may have some paperwork well before the transaction comes to be. And this is what this loop is for. It's just meant to have somewhere to house all of this buyer's prospect documents until we are ready to write up an offer for them. So when we first come in here, we can see we have a folder. And one best practice or recommendation is to have a folder per buyer. So you have every buyer, everything for every buyer all together. And when they are ready to write an offer, you just have one place that you have everything that we can copy from this loop to your new transaction loop. So when you first log on, you do see you have the option here with just a folder. Your three little action dots over here on the right, and one of our options is to rename. So when we click on rename, let's say we're going to show the Smiths property this weekend. So we can rename the loop or the folder, whatever you want, so you know where to find this paperwork easily. And to get these buyer agency docs that we need to show them property this weekend, we can click on templates. And within templates, we can use our BDG RE Buyer Docs 2024. Now, this template has buyer documents, and most of these can be found in the templates when you create a transaction loop. But because we don't have a transaction loop yet, we just want the agency docs. I think the fastest way for you guys to access those docs is this Buyer Docs 2024. And you can see here when I click on that, we have our options of documents. And what we've done is we took our working with real estate agent disclosure 201, 710, and 220 and put these right here at the top for you guys so you don't have to search too much for them. Obviously, need working with real estate agent disclosure. We need 201, 220. You want to go ahead and add that if the listing firm or the seller is paying you. We want that signed and in writing. So 220 accomplishes that. You may want to go ahead and add 710 as well while we're here. If you don't add it now, that's okay. We can always come back and add it later, the same steps. I do think we're going to be amending our buyer agency agreement regularly, especially if we enter into the agency agreement with a limited time, like, for example, just through the weekend or a limited number of property or properties. So if we create buyer agency just to show 123 Main Street today, for example, and they want to see something else tomorrow, we would need 710 to amend 201 to amend the agency agreement. So for simplicity for the Smiths, I'm just going to go ahead and do, again, the working with real estate agent disclosure 201, 710, and 220. And then I'm going to come down here and hit copy. And you can see it's telling me it imported 404 documents. I say okay. And then boom, there's that paperwork that we need for the Smiths to get them in the front door this weekend so we can show them property. From here, you're going to do like you always do. So you open the docs. When you click on the Smiths up here, you can see it selects all boxes. Note that when you start checking boxes, may it be all of them or just one, these little blue options up here kind of pop up. Right now it's white space. But when I click up here, I got some different options. You may want to, select all and open them all and fill them all in and either send them out for e-signatures before the showing or print them out and have everybody sign them on, on the hood of your car before you let them in the front door. But one way or another, we do need 201 and working with real estate agent disclosure signed before you can cross the threshold, before you can get them in the front door of any property. So now you have another buyer come along. So let's say the Joneses call you, or the Joneses say, oh, we want to see property this weekend as well. Again, best practice recommendation is that we have a folder per buyer. So right now I have the Smith's paperwork. I had the Joneses call. So I click on add folder up here at the right. And you can see it's already allowing me to rename it. So I'm going to change new folder to Jones. Again, just to help keep it organized. So when the Jones are ready to make an offer, I have this in one nice, neat little place for us. So Joneses, I'm going to do a couple templates or do my template. I'll do my buyer docs 2024 like we did before. Maybe this listing firm isn't offering to pay me, so I don't need 220. Maybe you want to put 710 in, or maybe you just want to add it if you need it. Again, that's entirely up to you, but know that it's here and know that it will be used. For the Joneses, though, right now, we just need the working with real estate agent disclosure in 201. So I'll copy those, say okay. And again, I can check up here. I can open them and I can fill them in and either send for e-signatures or print out and have them sign at the property before we go in the front door. So first, this is a twofold. So first off was just kind of organizing and maintaining this loop. You notice we don't have to do anything with people because we're not adding, unless you want them to sign, you may want to add a person, but just remember when they're there, they're always going to be there. So it might be, that's up to you. If you want to add them so they can e-sign, you'll have to add them as a person. If you want to print it and take it to them, then you don't have to add them as a person. So I'd imagine that would be maybe a case by case, but you have the same options with this loop that you do with any other loop. So you've been out with the Joneses and they saw the one that they wanted. They said, let's write it up. Now it's time to create a transaction loop. So we're going to take, once we create that transaction loop, we're going to take this buyer agency paperwork and put it in that transaction loop. Creating the transaction loop, start up here with add loop, and that's that piece that you guys always do where you add the loop and then you select a template. I have went ahead and created my transaction loop just for simplicity of this video. I selected the buyer resale template. So now when we go into this new loop, you can see I have my template populated. So here's my buyer agency disclosure folder with the buyer agency paperwork. I have my offer and contract, etc. Again, this is what we've always seen. So we want to come and add the people. This is a new loop. So we want to come and add the people and, the address and all that good stuff. Before we get carried away with writing the offer and everything, now that I have my new transaction loop, before I forget, let's go back to my buyer prospects agency docs loop. And I need to take this paperwork, this signed agency paperwork, whatever I have in this folder for the Joneses, I need to take this and copy it into the new transaction loop. So again, I check the little box next to the Joneses, which selects everything in this folder. And then this time, my actions up here, I'm going to make a copy. So I make a copy. I'm going to copy it as a .loop document. We don't need to do anything here. And then I have two options to either copy it to templates or copy it to the loop. We want to copy it to the loop. And then I just start typing the address of the loop that I want to copy it to. So 123 Main Street, 1234 Main Street was our loop. And you'll notice when I click on that, it gives me further options of which folder within this loop to put it in. So I'm going to put it in my buyer agency disclosure folder because this is buyer agency docs. Once I select the folder, make sure I have the right loop. Then I'm going to say copy. It's going to tell me 2 of 2 have imported. I say okay. From this point, because I'm now done with the Joneses in my buyer prospect agency doc. So you may just want to close it. Um, when everything's closed, you can kind of move your folders around. So if you want to push them all the way to the bottom, you also have the option, if you want to, you can also archive them. So they're not in your way. So they're not, you don't see them every time you log on, and you can just now focus on the Smiths and whatever other buyers you may be working with. So if we go back to our transaction loop, I have my 1234 Main Street, and you can see those two docs that are completed. Theoretically, they would be completed. Again, I did not do that for this video. But you can see those two docs from the buyer prospect loop have been copied into this loop. You also have the two that were here when we started. So when you create the loop, these are automatically going to pop up just as part of the templates of the loop. I don't think that non-admins can archive these. If you can, you may want to archive these blank docs so they're not in your way. But I don't think you can. So if it doesn't let you, you may just want to kind of rename it, like do not use, for example. So we know which working with real estate agent disclosure you want to use and which one you don't. You may also want to kind of just move it to the bottom of this folder to get out of the way. You can see I had done another video where I had these as well. So you're not going to have these, of course, that say required, but you do kind of have the option to rename if you don't want it in your way, or just kind of tuck it down. Again, I don't think you can archive it, because when you first see them, they're going to be required, and only admin can archive required documents. So this was our kind of getting to know some best practices with our buyer prospect agency docs. The suggestion, recommendation of having a folder per buyer so you can easily find the paperwork you need for each buyer. And then when they're ready to write up that offer, how we can take this paperwork and put it into that loop. So now you can write up the offer, get them under contract, and get them closed. Thank you.